Okay guys, welcome back to another fun-filled, action-packed, non-flipped Algebra 2 classroom with me, Coach Gu, and this is the notes for the last notes we're going to do. It says factoring by Xbox method when A is not 1, but honestly, this method, if you do this the right way every time, this always works. This will always give you your factored out form, okay? So yesterday we factored when A was 1, right? Today we're going to be dealing when A is not 1. So yesterday, when A was 1, we're breaking down a quadratic equation. Quadratic equation is like ax squared plus bx plus c. And we're breaking it down into two factors. That's two sets of parentheses, right? And we're trying to figure out what goes in those parentheses. But yesterday, when A was 1, we knew that the first term in each parentheses was what? Does anybody remember? What was the first term in each parentheses yesterday when A was 1? Not x squared, just x. It was just x, right? So we had x at the beginning, right? But today, since A is not 1, then you cannot assume that x goes in the first space of the parentheses. So we pretty much have no idea what goes in those blanks. But using this x box method, you can find out exactly what your two factors should be, exactly what goes into those two parentheses. So we're going to do an example. We're going to factor the following equation. Notice it just says factor. It doesn't say solve. So we don't have to go to the x equals part. We just have to factor it out. All right, the equation is 8x squared equals negative 12 minus 22x. You guys see that example on your papers? Okay. So we always need to make sure of the first two steps. You got to make sure the first two steps are taken care of every single time. And that is make sure that the equation is set equal to 0. And you want to make sure that the terms are in order from highest power to lowest power. Okay? So right now it says equals negative 12 minus 22x. We want it to say equals 0. So what can we do? What should we do? Okay, we could subtract the 8x squared, but that would make it negative, right? And we don't want to deal with negatives, so what's another way we could do it? Add what? Add 22x to both sides, right? And what else would we also have to add? The 12. So when we add the 22x and we add the 12 to both sides, what's my new equation then? 8x squared plus 22x plus 12. That's right. Equals 0. That was the point. Now, why did you say 8x squared plus 22x plus 12 and not 8x squared plus 12 plus 22x? It has to go from the highest to the lowest power. Good. Nice. So that's the first step. You always want to make sure of that first. Then the next step that you always want to check for is there a greatest common factor? Okay? Because if I just tried to, do the X box with these numbers, 8, 22, and 12, those are pretty big numbers, right? And you're going to struggle to find the factors. When we take out the GCF, the greatest common factor, we make those numbers smaller, and it's a lot easier to find our factors. So is there a greatest common factor here? What would it be? 2, that's right. 2 is the biggest number that I can divide out of all of those numbers. So, okay. So we factor out a 2, and that's pretty much like dividing every term by 2. So what is left inside the parentheses then when I divide every term by 2? 4x squared, right? Plus 11x. Plus 6, that's right. Equals 0, that's right. So there we go. We factored out the greatest common factor, which is 2. And now look, our numbers are a lot smaller. It's going to be easier to work with. So now we're going to factor out this 4x squared plus 11x plus 6. And let me write this 2 in red just real quick. We're going to be using that later. So now from this step, we're ready to use the X box. And we're just going to fill it out as normal to start out with. Okay, so what is your A value here?
4.
It's just 4. Remember, it's just a number. What is B? 11. And what is C? 6. That's right. So we're going to fill it out as normal. So what goes in the top space there? A times C, which is 24. What goes in the bottom space? B, which is 11. Good. Now, how do I find the two numbers that go in the side spaces? They multiply to 24 and adds to 11. Very good. So they need to multiply to the top number and add to the bottom number. So can you think of the two numbers that would satisfy those conditions? 8 times what? 8 times 3. 8 times 3, right? So it's 8. And make sure you write it towards the bottom a little bit this time, okay? Write it a little bit down. You need some space here. 8 and 3. So guys, if you ever struggle, right, finding those factors, look, just write all the factors of your number. So like if I have 24, I will go 1 and 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8, 4 times 6. And then look, oh wow, this pair right here, 8 times 3, that makes 24, but 8 plus 3 is 11, and then I found my pair. So by listing out your factors, you can always find your pair. Okay, anyway, so we've got 8, we got the 3. Our next step now, if you read step 4, we're going to draw a fraction line above these two numbers. Got to hold on until the end. You're going to see the math of it all, the wonder. So you draw a fraction line over both of those, and then on top of that fraction line, you're going to write a times x. So what is a? 4. So we're going to write 4x, a, your a value, x. So it's 4x on top of both. Okay, so now we've got our fractions right there, and what we're going to do, every time you have fractions, right, you always want to reduce it as much as possible. So, what can I reduce this 4 over 8 to? 1 over 2, right. But I don't need to write the 1, I can just put x, right? X over 2. You have to reduce it because you're not going to get the right answer if you don't. X over 2, right. Because 4 over 8 reduces to 1 over 2, right? But you don't need to write 1x. You can just write x. Yeah, what about the 4 over 3? Does that reduce any further? No, so we just leave it like that. So now, once we've reduced as much as we can both of our fractions, that tells you what goes in each parentheses. Remember, we're trying to figure out what our factors are, what goes in each set of parentheses. The numerator, right here, is x. That goes in the first space in your parentheses, so x. The denominator, what is this? 2. Positive or negative? Positive. So plus 2, that goes in your second space of the parentheses, like that. So we've got x plus 2 as one of my factors. What would my other factor be then?
4x plus 3.
That's right, 4x plus 3. And that is crazy because back then we just had to guess this stuff. But, and remember, don't forget the equals 0, right? Equals 0. But what am I forgetting here, though? That's right. Zoom it out. Look at this. Originally, we had this 2 right here, right? That can't, right here? That needs to come all the way down, and it's in front of my factored form. Because this x plus 2 times 4x plus 3, that's the same thing as this 4x squared plus 11x plus 6, but what happened to the 2? It can't just disappear, so you got to bring it down. And that means you have successfully factored out the quadratic. So there it is. If you had to solve for x, though, if the question said to solve, what would you have to do from here? No. If you have to solve for x, like find out what x equals. Remember, we did this yesterday. X plus 2 equals 0. Remember that? Yeah, this is solving right here. You take your factors and set each factor to 0. Like this. And then you could find your two x values. Right? So I want you guys to flip to the back side and attempt those two problems. Alright, here we go. Number 1. What do we need to do first on number 1 right here? Set it equal to 0. So how do we do that? Subtract 3. When I subtract 3 from both sides, what's my new equation then? 6x squared plus 7x minus 3 equals 0. Very good. Okay, and next we would check for a greatest common factor, but is there a greatest common factor that's not 1? No, so we can just skip that step and go straight into the x box. So, what is a, b, and c? 6, 7, and negative 3, that's right. So now with the x box, don't mess it up here now. What goes in the top space?
-18.
So a times c, which is negative 18, that's right. What goes in the bottom space?
7.
B, which is 7. Alright, so now, what two numbers multiply to give you negative 18 and add to give you 7? Negative 2 and 9. What is my next step after this, though?
5. So it's like a 5.
Well, you're going to put a fraction line, right? And on top of the fraction line?
6x.
How did you get that 6?
A.
Because it's a, right. Whatever a is, and then x. So 6x and 6x. Okay, so now what can I do from here? Now we simplify, right. So what would the 6 over negative 2 reduce to? 3x over negative 1, that's right. Keep the negative where it is. The negative was on the bottom right here. Keep it on the bottom because that actually matters in this process. So now on the right side, 6 over 9, what does that simplify to? 2 over 3, that's right. So it's going to be 2x over 3, right. Don't forget the x's. So now those fractions tell me what goes inside my parentheses. So what are my two factors?
3x minus 1.
That's right, 3x minus 1.
And then 2x plus 3.
That is correct. Like this. Equals?
0.
0. Now remember, the original question said to factor and solve. So how do I solve?
3x minus 1 equals 0. 2x plus 3 equals 0.
That's right. 3x minus 1 equals 0. So you set your factors equal to 0. Okay, so now let's solve this one. 3x minus 1, what do I need to do?
Plus 1.
That's right, plus 1 to both sides. So that gives me 3x equals 1 then. So x equals 1/3. That's one of my solutions. Now for this other one, 2x plus 3, what do I need to do there?
Subtract 3.
Subtract 3. So 2x equals negative 3, and then
X equals negative 3/2.
divide by 2, so x equals negative 3/2. That's right, nice. Okay, on to the second example. There's a few more steps here, and some of them could be tricky, so let's make sure we get them right. On number 2, what do we need to do first here? Add 15x. And so when I add 15x to both sides, what's my new equation?
6x squared plus 15x minus 9 equals 0.
Right, and we line it up like this because remember the powers have to go from highest power to lowest power. Okay, so now what's my next step that I should check for?
To see what goes in it.
To see if there's a greatest common factor, right. So is there a greatest common factor?
Yes.
What is it?
3.
3, that's right. So I pull the 3 out. Oh, why did I write 5? What? Okay. Pull the 3 out. And what's left then when I divide everything by 3?
2 4x squared plus 5 minus 3.
Plus 5. Plus 5x.
5x, yeah.
Minus 3
Yeah.
equals, that's right. So now we've taken out the GCF, and now we're ready to start the X box. So we need to identify A, B, and C. What is A?
2.
That's right. What is B?
5.
And what is C?
Negative 3.
Negative 3. Very good. So now with the X box, what goes in the top space then?
A and C.
A times C, which is? Negative 6. That's right. And what goes in the bottom space? B, which is 5. So now, what two numbers multiply to give you negative 6 and add to give you positive 5? 6 and what? 6 and negative 1, right? That's one that usually people struggle with because people forget that the first factor of any number is 1 and itself. Okay, so you always want to check that 1 and itself, okay? Okay, so what do I do from here now that I have the 6 and the negative 1?
Divide by 2x.
Well, you're not dividing by 2x. You put the fraction line thing, and then on top you put A, which is 2x. That's right. Okay, now what do we need to do from here? Simplify.
It'd be 1x over 3, right?
So, yeah, exactly. So we got x over 3. And over here, that one's already simplified. So we don't need to do anything with the 2x over the negative 1. So what are my two factors then?
X plus 3.
That's right.
And then 2x minus 1.
X plus 3 and 2x minus 1. That's right. Equals 0. Okay, so now final step. I just got to solve for x. So what are my two equations? How do I solve for x? So what do I write?
X plus 3 equals 0.
X plus 3 equals 0 and?
Minus 2x minus 1 equals 0.
That's right. All right, so x plus 3 equals 0. What do I need to do to solve for x? Subtract 3, so x equals, that's right, that's one solution, x equals negative 3. Now with the 2x minus 1, what do I need to do? Add 1 to both sides, so I have 2x equals 1, and then last step. That's right, divide by 2 and x equals 1/2. Very good. And that's it. That's factoring. You're solving for x, and that's exactly it. So that's going to be the end of these notes and the end of this unit. So see you in the next one. Peace!